The following program is being presented to you by a community producer. The statements, views, and opinions expressed are not necessarily those of ALC-TV or the City of Avon Lake.
Welcome to Common Sense. Common Sense is a series of shows that feature interviews with very interesting people, and that will help us to learn who they are, what they do, and what makes sense to them and what doesn't, in a clear, concise, and direct way. I'm Rudy Breglia, and today I'll be interviewing Doctor of Divinity, Kathryn
Wither.
I see. And she's wise and wonderful, and she was a former director of Family Life Office in the Archdiocese of New York, an entrepreneur, and now recently retired. Welcome to Common Sense.
Thank you, Rudy. It's great to be here.
Okay. Well, to start us off, why don't you give us a little background, where you were born, where you've lived, what brings you to Lorain County?
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in Lorain.
Okay.
I was the fourth of 8 kids.
Wow, that must have been fun.
Yeah, oh yeah. And so I have 6 brothers and 1 sister. 4 of my siblings are in the area. And
wonderful.
Yeah. I've lived most of my life here in Northeast Ohio. I went to Ohio State University, so I spent 4 years
congratulations,
there.
yeah.
And then I accepted a position in New York, Archdiocese in New York in 2013.
Okay.
So that was really the only time I went outside of Ohio. That was 9 years. And last summer, my husband Dave and I came back to Avon Lake.
Okay, well, welcome back.
Yeah,
okay.
thanks.
Tell us about the steps in your career.
So, and I may use my notes just because I don't want to forget anything important.
No, fine.
But, so I went to Ohio State University and majored in medical record administration. So,
okay.
When I came back, I got a job as a supervisor in medical record administration at Cleveland Metro Hospital, which is now Metro Health.
Okay.
And I was there for 4 years, although this was back in the 70s, 80s. And they didn't have office automation back then.
Okay.
So
a lot of paper.
A lot of paper. The area in medical records that I was supervisor over was dictation and transcription for the physicians.
Okay.
And that lent itself really well to office automation, word processing, really.
Right.
And they had decided that this should be a hospital-wide initiative, so they created a position for me in information services, and that's really when I kind of got my start working with technology.
Okay.
So I was there for only 4 years. I had an opportunity to be a partner in a small startup where they were doing office automation training.
Wow.
So I joined that other partner, and after a couple years she left, so I was sole owner, changed the name to my then married name, which was Werner Consulting Services.
Okay.
And we did training and consulting. We were early tech teachers. And, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, that was big stuff, you know, teaching Windows and the applications and working with networks and help desks.
Everybody starting out, huh?
Yeah. So it was good business. In the meantime, I had actually gone back to Baldwin Wallace College to get an MBA. And business was booming. Tragically, my first husband died.
Oh, that's too bad.
He died by suicide.
Oh.
So that was 1992, and I had 2 sons, and so it was a time of struggle and suffering and questioning, and I was actually a lapsed Catholic. Didn't get married in the church, no faith at that point.
Okay.
So eventually I met my current husband, Dave.
Okay.
He was a man of faith who brought me back to the church. He basically said, "Your faith is rusty."
Wonderful.
Yeah, so eventually we married, and he went on the continued search with me for some of those deeper questions in life. So we both went into the seminary for a Master's of Theology degree.
Okay.
So we did that, and you know, my boys were then 6 and 7, so Dave became dad to him. He also has 3 children in the area, and we have 6 grandchildren.
Congratulations.
Thank you, yeah. So when it was time for them to go to high school, we were living in Aurora and we wanted them to go to St. Ignatius High School.
Okay.
So we were going to move to Cleveland, the Cleveland area, so they were close. And, God's hand was working in my life the whole time. Someone had said, go to Our Lady of Mount Carmel School, and we actually found a condo that was right down the street from them. So we moved in there. The boys went there the last couple years before they started high school. And the sisters who were running the school, the Mercedarian Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, invited me to teach Catholic doctrine there.
How nice.
So I was at Our Lady of Mount Carmel for 10 years teaching Catholic doctrine. I had finished, in the meantime, the master's degree in theology. I felt very at home at the seminary. So I stayed and worked as a graduate assistant part-time for a little bit, and they invited me to start their Doctor of Ministry program. So I had done that, and interestingly, I'll talk about the project that I had. Interestingly, it led me to what some of the work I'm doing now also. So at Mount Carmel, when I was finished with my doctorate degree, I stayed at the parish for a little bit, worked as a pastoral assistant. By then, the boys were already in college, out of town.
Right.
Dave was kind of anticipating retirement and realized, number one, we couldn't probably survive on that salary. But also, I had some gifts now, a lot of experience and education to offer to build up God's kingdom.
Right.
So I went to CatholicJobs.com, and in 2013, I saw the job in New York.
Popped up. Okay.
I did not want to go to New York City, but we did. Stayed there for 9 years, worked for the Archdiocese. It was a privilege to be there, and then we retired to Avon Lake.
Okay. What part of New York did you live in?
So the Archdiocese was in Midtown Manhattan,
right.
But we lived in Long Island City, which is Queens.
Sure, I'm very familiar with that, yeah. Tell us how the Catholic Church ministers to people with mental illness and their families.
So that was basically my doctoral project, and the way I got that was my sister, who had lived with my mom, had serious mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And my mom had passed away in 2008, and my sister lived with her. So now we invited her to live with us. And I had already been approved for the Doctor of Ministry program with a different project. And when my sister came to live with us, we switched counties, which in the mental health area is a little tricky because you're switching all kinds of services. So I had explained to the priest who was running the Doctor of Ministry program that, unless we really changed my project, I really couldn't commit to this, long-term thing. And he said, change it to mental health issues and ministering to people with mental illness. So I did that, and the title of my project was actually We Heal One Another, how the church ministers to people with mental illness and their families.
Okay.
And the We Heal One Another was significant because, and actually I'm working with the Catholic Psych Institute, relationship is their core value. So some mental illnesses are actually, chemical brain imbalances.
Right.
But some have to do with, more humanistic or mind kind of things. So that became kind of important in that. I also, when I went to the Archdiocese of New York, unbeknownst to me, as I was going to be spearheading a suicide prevention a youth suicide mental health prevention program.
Wow.
The Cardinal missioned me. He didn't ask me. He said, I want you to vigorously quarterback this. So I got a lot of experience between that Doctor of Ministry program and my sister, working with the Catholic Psych Institute, which I'm actually doing now, and what was my last thing, and doing the Suicide Prevention Initiative.
Okay.
So I'd say a couple of the practical insights that I had learned and how the church ministers to people with mental illness and their families is, first of all, you need the awareness and the education. Now, I did my doctoral project 13 years ago, so a lot has changed. And as we think about COVID, how much awareness that had brought to that whole issue. So that was good. But you also need to be educated. And at a parish level, it's a little tricky. The pastor probably needs to be the one who prioritizes it, because it's a difficult topic to even address. When I worked with the schools in the Archdiocese of New York, we needed to bring this program into all of the archdiocesan schools. And one of the biggest challenges was the fear of acknowledging it, of even saying the word suicide.
Yeah.
So that was a hurdle to get over. But so I'm working with the Catholic Psych Institute, and one of the things that they do, and they're creating a workshop that can equip churches and frontline people, teachers and catechists and youth ministers, to be able to respond to some of those mental health challenges like anxiety or depression or even gender dysphoria.
Okay.
So there are things available if a parish or a diocese wants to get started with making people aware that, you know, there are probably people in our congregation that struggle with mental health issues.
Yep.
The other thing is to know the resources that are available. So one good program that I know of is Mental Health First Aid, which helps either children or adults. There's two separate programs. But if your viewers look at the Catholic Diocese here in Cleveland, most of the dioceses, especially their Catholic Charities offices, have resources for addressing mental health challenges. So
good to know.
Yeah, and one last thing is to not to be able to publish or put out literature and flyers and things that, you know, let people know that this is an issue that we're addressing without any stigma. And if you've got on the personal property at a parish, if you can put things up, or through any of your digital communications on your website, just make it known, you know, some of the realities that we're all on a spectrum. We all struggle with some sort of mental issues. There's also the new 988 crisis, suicide and crisis lifeline, which started actually last summer. It rolled out, but they used to have a national suicide prevention lifeline, which was the regular 10-digit phone number.
Yeah.
That last summer was changed to the 3-digit 988.
Okay.
Good for crisis, good for people to know about, and of course there's a crisis text line that's a national number also. So those are, I think, a couple of things.
Okay, I think that's great. And that line of we're all on a spectrum, that was interesting. Tell us about the new Catholic mentoring program that has been launched by the Catholic Psych Institute.
So I was excited when Dr. Bottaro, who founded Catholic Psych Institute, launched this back in 2012.
Okay.
I met him when I went to the Archdiocese of New York. So he got his doctorate from the Institute of Psychological Sciences, or IPS, which was based in Arlington, Virginia.
Okay.
And it's a Catholic graduate school of psychology. But before he got his doctorate, he discerned a vocation with the Franciscan Friars of Renewal in New York City.
Okay.
Okay. And he was guided by and mentored by the pretty renowned Father Benedict Rochelle,
Okay.
who's both a Catholic priest and a Catholic psychologist.
Heard that name.
And Father Benedict actually worked with Greg, and they learned how to integrate the spiritual life with the emotional life. And so Greg a few years later realized he was not called to religious life. He was actually called to marriage. So he left the friars, and he ended up finishing his doctorate. And then he started the Catholic Psych Institute, because as he was working as a Catholic, he realized that there were some demands from the secular world that really didn't ring true with him as a Catholic. And what he decided to do was, with this new organization, create a new Catholic standard for mental wellness and health.
Okay.
And a part of that is this new mentoring program that has the acronym IDDM, which stands for Integrated Daily Dialogic Mentoring.
Okay.
So, and he uses, right now he's using an app that lets their clients or their mentees share every day with their therapist or mentor. But he created this program, first of all, so that a client or a patient or a mentee could could dialogue with them every single day, and they can talk about their faith because we know God is a part of the healing process, which in the secular therapeutic world, you have the traditional 45-minute appointment that is weekly, bi-weekly.
Okay.
So if someone's having a struggle, let's just say with an anxiety attack on a Monday, and they don't see their therapist for another week or two, by the time that rolls around and they have to remember it and speak about it, he felt that the healing could be better. But a big thing was they also could not bring God into the healing process. So he started this program. So he still does his therapeutic or his psychotherapy because he's got therapists on board. But he's also taking people like me, just regular frontline people that work with others, and teaching them how to integrate the faith with good, sound psychology. Because his thought was, again, thinking about that we heal one another, is the relationship is so key that as long as we have a relationship with somebody, we're doing half of the work that they would do as therapists. And knowing we're all on a spectrum, he works with mentors to help them understand when can you handle something versus when do you refer it to a therapist. So that was the integrated is integrating the faith with the psychology. The daily dialogics is daily the mentor can talk with the mentee, no matter what's going on, so that you're constantly talking about small, minor issues that may just take away from you being a peaceful, joy-filled person. And then, of course, the mentoring. So I think that was it for that one.
Yeah. What approaches did you use for teaching morality to middle schoolers? What was that like, and on what did you concentrate?
So that was while I was teaching at Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Okay.
And the Mercedarian sisters were blessed. They had a generous benefactor who wanted to have Catholic doctrine taught as a specialized subject, and they wanted them to hire somebody with a theology background. So that's how I got hired there in the first place. Normally in a Catholic school, a homeroom teacher might teach religion, but we were able to get in there, and I started with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders the first year, and then added 7th and 8th graders.
Tough group.
Well, but the beauty of it was when we hit the 6th grade, where you're dealing with puberty.
Yes.
And I've had the children in the 4th grade and the 5th grade, and they knew me and they were comfortable with me, and their parents knew me and were comfortable with me. By the time we got to the 6th grade and had to talk about those sensitive issues, abortion, contraception, homosexuality, it was a lot easier.
Okay. Developed relationships and.
Yeah. Times were a lot easier then also.
Yeah.
Now we're really in a post-Christian era, but back then it was a little easier. And they were somewhat giddy, but what we focused on is how God loves us, and he's designed sex to really be good for marital love. And that was the foundation. Now the key that we used was we created a program, I called it the Changing Child Sexuality Program. We integrated the Catholic faith with biology and science and health. So I worked with the school nurse and the science health teacher, and we planned it so our lessons were coming together at the same time. So as the science health teacher was teaching about the biological and physiological, when the egg and the sperm come together, and you have your fertile and infertile times, I was able to use that and talk about how it leads from a Catholic perspective to what we called then, and a little bit now, natural family planning, when you want to plan your family. God's love, really, sexual love, has two main purposes. One is to bring the husband and wife together in love, and then the second is to procreate. So you can learn, and God designed a beautiful system. We talk about the environment is let's keep the ecology good, and that's out there. But inside, he's created a beautiful system. So how do we honor that and use that according to God's plan? So we had a question box. So, I needed to know what they knew. and their questions were all over the board. So to have a level of control, they put their questions on scrap pieces of paper and napkins and put them in the question box. And I was able to kind of filter them if they were appropriate or not. And so that's really how we taught them. I do admire today those teachers and those people who have to deal with some of those sensitive issues. So.
Okay, tough, always tough. Tell us what approaches you use to get that same message to adults.
To the parents,
yeah.
And to the teachers, but to the parents. So whenever you're teaching, at least back then, when you were teaching anything related to sexuality, you needed parental permission. And so that was critical. And we got permission from every student's parent to let them sit in these sessions with me. There was only one student in the whole 10 years I was there whose mom was a little concerned. But I met with her, we resolved the issues, and he sat in the class. So that was good. The toughest issue I had to deal with was contraception. It's the church's teaching that prohibits the use of artificial birth control to regulate pregnancies. But what we started with is some presumptions, and the presumptions, we talked a little bit about sin because everybody's concerned with sin. And sin, I explained, is really any offense against God, who is love. And you're only guilty or culpable of sin if you know about it and if you're totally free to make that decision. And I put myself in that same boat with them, and I said, I had no idea. We knew nothing about sex growing up. Never talked about it. Sex and suicide go together. People don't want to talk about either of them. But you do the best you can at the time, and God speaks to you through all of those experiences. It's the law of gradualness, where throughout your life you gradually come to understand some of God's truths. But we explained that, and what they needed was a lot of prerequisite or peripheral background about just the church and church teaching, and about how God reveals truths to us, how our reasoning power is a little bit limited, but there's more beyond that we're blessed that God revealed things to us. We talked about the different levels of hierarchical teaching. So the teaching on contraception is at a lower level than the teaching that we hear, like in our creed, that God is Trinity, and that there are angels, and that Jesus was both human and divine. So, to bear that in mind, and sometimes those change over time, but we talked about the development of doctrines and how there was a broadening meaning of sexual intercourse over the history of the church. So I felt when they left, they were comfortable, they were enlightened, and they realized there was probably a lot they didn't know, so they were open.
Well, that sounds great. What were your responsibilities as a director of the Family Life Office?
So all of the directors, really what our focus was is we needed to carry out the vision and mission of the Archbishop, who was Cardinal Timothy Dolan.
Right, famous.
So I was a member of his cabinet, so we met monthly. I was his Archdiocesan coordinator of his pro-life commission for about 4 years. We had Sisters of Life in there. We actually had one of the founding sisters in the office, but I was the first lay director. I took over for a Sister of Life, and there were 2 Sisters of Life before me, and then prior to that, an Archdiocesan priest was the director of the office, and actually the last year I was there, he was consecrated as a bishop, Bishop John Bonici.
Okay.
So that was who I was kind of standing on the shoulders of. But the issue with the sisters is they imbued the office with their charism and spirituality. So when I got there, I was able to focus a little bit more on the operational, the technology, and the business aspect.
Okay.
But what we had is we led a team of, or I led a team of anywhere from 10 to 17 people. We supported resources for the 290 plus parishes. We had 8 to 10 ministries or programs that we supported. So we had, under marriage ministries, we had marriage preparation and marriage enrichment. Under family life ministries, we had parenting and fertility awareness, which also falls under marriage prep as natural family planning. We had consolation ministries, which or consolation and healing ministries, which was a ministry to separated and divorced people. We had a pastoral bereavement program that included what was called the Emmaus Ministry for Grieving Parents, where to meet the spiritual needs of those parents whose children died at any age, of any cause, no matter when, that fell under that pastoral bereavement. And it is a special kind of grieving for a parent.
You bet.
And then eventually we added the suicide prevention. And then we had Spanish programming, which we strove to take every English provided ministry and have a Spanish counterpart for it. Our cornerstone ministry was marriage preparation, where we prepared 2,500 plus or minus couples for a sacramental marriage every year.
Okay.
What else? One opportunity I would just like to share is I was blessed to be able to work with an awful lot of Archdiocesan clergy, with St. Joseph Seminary, who you probably know as Dunwoody Seminary.
Yes.
And I was privileged to be a part of 2 World Meeting of Families, so one in Ireland, and one when Pope Francis came to the United States. He came to Washington, D.C., New York City, and Philadelphia. So I was a part of that planning process. Dave and I were able to be at the Pope Francis's Vespers, which was evening prayer at the St. Patrick's Cathedral. And we had front row seats at Madison Square Garden when he celebrated Mass.
Wow.
So I've had some fun and interesting things there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Now, you started to, could you tell us more about the marriage prep programs that you managed?
Yeah, so when I got there, Business 101 says, don't make any change until you've observed or assessed the current.
Right.
So I did, and I felt that there were some improvements that could be made in the marriage preparation program. I had permission to survey all of the pastors in the Archdiocese and solicit their feedback about marriage prep, but also all of the ministries in our office to see where we stood. And from that, I took that feedback, and we ended up rebuilding the marriage prep program.
Okay.
So we wanted to make sure that we can engage the young folks that were coming to be married. We wanted to make sure we had a program where we had consistent delivery, no matter who was facilitating that or where they were taking it. So we had a blended in-person and online program. So let me just here talk about the in-person program. Was called Pre-Cana, which most Catholics who are at least married in the church know that's the day of preparation. That was one component, though, but we had it. The word Cana comes from the wedding feast of Cana, where Jesus changed all that water into that good wine. But what we did is we decided we wanted to have some good video. So we contracted with Spirit Youth Studios, based in Chicago, who had done World Youth Days and worked with Bishop Barron. But they came to New York, and we created 7 short videos. We did a welcome video with Cardinal Dolan. We had videos with an archdiocesan priest, with Dr. Bottaro, who's a clinical psychologist, with Dr. Ann Nolte, who is a board-certified family physician with a concentration in women's health and fertility. And we had 4 diverse couples who were married in the church and shared their stories and testimonies. So we took these 7 videos and embedded them in 60-plus PowerPoint slides.
Wow.
And about a dozen exercises. We built them into one program that the trained facilitators could use, so we had that consistency. And we also had things recorded that were the tough things to talk about, like natural family planning and contraception and those. So we made sure that it got out there. So that was the catechetical piece we wanted. We had a priest at every single pre-Cana, short of a few exceptions, and we worked with the director of worship and liturgy to customize the order of blessing. So the priest came and he blessed the couples in the women's engagement rings. He gave them a quick talk, and then he was available for the sacrament of reconciliation for anybody that wanted to take advantage of confession. I mean, they didn't know the priest, so it was much easier than anything else.
Yeah.
I think we had about 11% of the people that came to pre-Canas on average that took advantage of that. So 2 more pieces is getting near the end of that day, or that pre-Cana. we led the couples in what's called the examen prayer. Now I say we because Dave and I, since we rebuilt this, we did like the first 15 to 20 pre-Canas, facilitated them, so we can truly test this out before the team of facilitators had them. So we led the couples in the examen prayer, which is a prayer that St. Ignatius 400 years ago developed, and it's a prayer that helps you come closer to God. But what he realized is God speaks to our hearts through our emotions. And using this, you sit with your spouse at the end of a day, and you really, you calm your mind, you become aware of God's presence in your life, and you reflect on the day's emotions. Was I angry? Was I sad? Was I mad? Was I fearful? And you wonder, and you reflect on was God speaking to me? And each spouse would share out loud with the other spouse. So we did that, and it was very moving. So then we closed the day. And the way we closed the day is we had a slide up, and what we wanted to do was connect the end of the day with how Cardinal Dolan welcomed them in the very beginning. And when he welcomed them, he offered them 3 invitations. 1, to invite God into their marriage. 2, to join a parish community, and 3, to get to Sunday Mass. So one of our goals was to bring people closer to the Eucharist. So we closed wanting to connect back to Cardinal Dolan's invitation to Mass, which is the Eucharist. So we took a quote from Pope Francis, and it was on the slide, and if I can read it.
Okay, go ahead.
I think it's powerful. It is in the Eucharist that all that has been created finds its greatest exaltation. It is the living center of the universe, the overflowing core of love and of inexhaustible life. Joined to the incarnate Son, present in the Eucharist, the whole cosmos gives thanks to God. Indeed, the Eucharist is itself an act of cosmic love. The Eucharist joins heaven and earth. It embraces and penetrates all creation. So when we allow the love of God to live in our hearts, we participate in that miracle of the universe, of God's cosmic act of creation. So that's how we close them out.
Wow.
I would just share that we also took that pre-Cana day and expanded it. We ended up, because of COVID, when COVID struck in 2020, we still had 2,500 couples a year that needed to be prepared.
Right.
And we knew it looked like quarantines and lockdowns were going to be for a while. So we worked with what was called the Catholic Faith Network. They had a studio similar to this, built right into the Cardinals, right into our building. It was actually the Cardinal studio.
Okay.
They worked with us to modify our pre-Cana script, to build in the PowerPoints, the videos, the timed exercises. We brought the facilitators in and we recorded them. And so out of that, we had an all-inclusive product that we were able to use as both a webinar and as a video-on-demand product. So we had 2 English products and 2 Spanish products, a virtual pre-Cana and a video-on-demand pre-Cana for those people that really couldn't attend them. So that was 4 products we had. And then we expanded that same script and program for convalidating couples. So Pew Research says that 1 out of 3 Catholic couples chooses not to marry initially in the Catholic Church, but hopefully later they come. So
Right.
We were targeting those couples that chose not to get married in the Catholic Church. The process to bring your marriage in the church is called convalidation. And so we took that, and that convalidation is a process of preparation, not dissimilar from marriage, the pre-Cana and marriage prep. So with a few tweaks, we were able to get 1 more product. So those are the marriage prep programs we had.
Well, that sounds great. How was the digital technology used by the Archdiocese to improve their ministry? And give me an example if you can.
Well, probably the best example is to piggyback off of that pre-Cana day and talk about the digital portion that we had. But just a note first is when I came to the Archdiocese, which is the 2nd largest diocese in the country with 2.5 million people,
Yeah.
I realized how much was already being done with digital technology.
Okay.
And being on the Cardinals' cabinet, I had exposure to it. So I added my little piece relative to family life because they already had things. But with marriage prep, we had the one-day pre-Cana
Right.
or the virtual pre-Cana, but we wanted a blend of online components that expanded on that. So we worked with an organization or a company called Catholic Faith Technologies, who at the time was called My Catholic Faith Delivered, who coincidentally was the company that created the curriculum that I used at Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Okay.
So
Is that a little divine intervention there?
I don't know. I think it was God's hand. But anyway, we worked with them to build an integrated system where we had we integrated the registration and the payment system for both English and Spanish, because prior to this, we had two separate programs, two separate everything, an English track and a Spanish track. So we unified those with this program. But then we added components it was like a learning platform where the couple goes through each step and they can't get out until they've completed each one, and then they get their certificate. So the first component we added was a relationship inventory.
Okay.
Premarital relationship inventory. And the intention of this was to help the couple discover their relationship strengths, as well as identify any areas for growth or any areas that might be potentially threatening to the vitality of their marriage. So when they registered in the system, they got a code to do one of the two inventories that we had, so they did it online, and then they got a report at the end that either went to their priest deacon or whoever facilitated it, or one that came directly to them. We had two choices. So that was one component. We also added two educational videos from the Augustine Institute, who created form.org that a lot of parishes use. So we used one of the videos from the Beloved series and one of the videos from the Symbolon series, and we created two worksheets, again, that the couples had to go through. And then really, we asked them to do two online evaluations, one of the pre-Cana day and one of the overall system, so we can get some feedback.
Right.
And then they were able to download their own certificate. We used to have to manually do their certificates, type them out, take them there, and if somebody didn't show up at the pre-Cana, we had to hold on to them or recreate them. So it was a beautiful system. So that was one of the things. The real power was we stayed connected to, at least when I left, there were 15,000 email addresses. So our post-Cana outreach served as marriage enrichment. So we can push formation things to them. We can push, using the Flocknote emailing system, we can give them events that were happening within the Archdiocese. But the second thing is, and we can use it to learn about where we needed to make improvements. So we collected and analyzed and used the data that we had gathered, either for ourselves to improve and change, or for other archdiocesan programming initiatives. So that was one. A second initiative was the suicide prevention, youth suicide prevention initiative. So,
Okay.
So again, key was that Cardinal Dolan wanted it, so it wasn't going to fail. As difficult as it was to get to this, he made it work. So what we had four digital components of this program. We did two videos of Cardinal Dolan, and we felt that was a powerful technique for him to share his love and concern for the students and share God's love for them. So every 7th and 8th grader at a minimum watched those videos, that video. Their parents received it, and we had less control over the high schools, but we asked the high school leadership to show that video of his to everybody. We did a second video of Cardinal Dolan to share with the high school leadership, because that was more so where the suicides were coming from, the ones that we had.
True.
And we needed them to really be open to this initiative. So we did that. We had two lessons, online lessons, and we called them Respect Life lessons because when the Cardinal asked me to do this, it was January of 2021, so we knew that we were going to roll out this program to the schools in the next academic year, which would typically have been September. September is Suicide Prevention Month, but we decided to roll these out in October, which is Respect Life Month. This way we were focusing on the life versus the death issue. And October is Respect Life Month. We called these lessons Respect Life lessons. I worked with two of the Sisters of Life and another Catholic psychologist, and put in content that the teachers can use. So they taught one for Respect Life Month, and then one in January where, we do the March for Life. So those were 2 good times to talk to the kids about it. And the goodness was it made it easier for the teacher to know what to say relative to this. We put on 3 parent webinars where we had 1,200 people register. And the last thing we did is we implemented a digital health suicide prevention learning tool. It was produced by a company in New York called Cognito. Now I noticed that they've moved to Massachusetts, and I don't know, I think they're starting to work under another company, but the product that the tool that they had was called Friend to Friend. It was a mental health suicide prevention tool.
Okay.
It was animated and interactive, and again, every 7th and 8th grade student had to go through that. And it helped them to know what the signs are of suicide. It helped them to reduce the stigma and just to understand some of the pieces of suicide. It helped them learn how to ask their peers directly, because one thing we realized is the kids know if an adult is afraid to talk about it. So they're going to go to their peers anyway. So it was a powerful tool in that regard. So just to kind of wrap that piece up, what we were able to do is we collect analytics from 3 of those 4. We had Vimeo analytics to see who really watched the Cardinals videos. Okay, and it was pretty high. We saw how many people using Google Analytics did the Respect Life lessons, and we were able to see from Cognito Analytics how many people used that friend-to-friend module. All in all, I would say that was a successful endeavor, at least for the 7th and 8th graders, and I would credit the superintendent. He made sure also that these were going to be successful. One last initiative we had that was a digital solution is what was called the Sister Hope chatbot. So we were pretty early on in working with chatbots, and I actually got the idea and got interested in it because my husband was on the board of the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, and he was looking at this Sister Hope chatbot, which is a faith-based emotional chatbot, did spiritual coaching. So it was a chatbot that the founder created as a secular tool. Michael Rouse was his name, and he was suffering from some depression. So what he ended up doing was going to a therapist who talked through things with him, and eventually he healed. And what he found is if he talked to some of his friends who, again, were somewhere on that spectrum dealing with issues, it worked. And he said, geez, if I can repeat these same kinds of things talking to my friends, why don't I build this into a chatbot using artificial intelligence? So that was created, and it's used for a lot of different things. But we know chatbots are used, when you're online looking for help and the chatbot pops up. So we did not have the mental health suicide prevention initiative yet, because this was in 2019. I had the perfect audience, though, with the marriage prep couples. Knowing that she's Sister Hope, and we're calling her a she, but it's a artificial intelligence. She gave you encouraging messages, but it was educational. And the secular chatbot that Michael Rouse created, he worked with a Catholic organization, I think it was Franciscans, and they Catholicized it. So she was able to give spiritual and emotional help. And my thought is, we can use this with our marriage prep couples, and we can offer it to them. So we did a quick pilot. COVID struck, so we had to move it into our virtual program. But we were able to pilot with 550 couples, so that's 1,100 people. 10% of them said, yeah, I'll try this, and they conversed with Sister Hope. And overall, they gave it a 95% helpfulness grade.
Wow.
Except we did realize this was great learning for us, and we needed to learn. We needed to not be afraid of some of this technology. But the best place for it is with the Catholic Charities or a mental health area, and that's who deals with it. But nevertheless, it was a good project to try. So that was our digital initiatives.
Wow, that's very impressive. What is the natural family planning and fertility awareness?
So if you remember when I talked about teaching the kids, and in 6th grade and going through puberty, we had the opportunity, and it is the right time to talk to them about fertility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but then from fertility, we led them to God's plan, which we still call natural family planning, which is the way that you can, still following God's design, space out pregnancies. Now, no sixth grader is thinking about family, so it was safe to do. So natural family planning, and actually, to be honest with you, NFP and fertility awareness are basically interchangeable today. But we had 2 videos on this in our marriage prep. That's how important it was. But natural family planning, or NFP, is the umbrella term for the fertility awareness methods that teach a husband and wife when the fertile and infertile times are, so that they can decide if I want to achieve or avoid pregnancy based on how they discern God is calling them. So what they do is they learn to read the signs, the internal and external signs of a woman's body, which really reveal the underlying hormonal changes that happen
You bet.
regularly. And by doing that, they understanding those biological or biomarkers and understanding how it's related to the hormones not only helps you understand your fertility, but it also leads to understanding women's health, and not only their reproductive health, but with a woman and her complex physiology, hormones really mean health. And so with contraception, you basically kind of shut off a lot of the natural hormones. Now, this is all just evolving now, because even when research was done, they usually did it with men because women were too complicated. But we have a whole slew of women now at the helm of companies looking at fertility awareness-based methods. And what we're calling it is there's been an explosion of what's called femtech, which is feminine technology, or any technology that aims to improve the lives of women. So natural family planning was the foundation, and these methods, which were manual and a woman had to observe and take a piece of paper and write down every day, they became automated. So some of the automation is with fertility apps or charting, or menstrual charting apps. There are home fertility monitors where a woman can really get an objective reading on where her hormones are. But again, natural family planning understands that you understand what hormones ought to be at what level at what time. But we also have wearable sensors now. I mean, just like I've got my Fitbit that tracks my steps and connects and syncs with my Weight Watchers app.
Yeah.
They have armbands and watches that take their temperature and connect with their app. So the woman has so much knowledge now. What used to be a really difficult thing to do, and why natural family planning really never caught on.
Tough time.
Yeah. Now it's becoming easier.
Yeah.
And there's a movement now where young women don't want to put chemicals into their bodies. So
Better off using physical
Yeah.
parameters.
A growing area is reproductive endocrinology, where you learn about those hormones and how they work. It's a beautiful science now coming up. So I think things are going to be good for women.
Yeah, it sounds great. What new church initiatives do you see to address current issues?
So I thought about 3 of them. One of them I wanted to mention is the National Eucharistic Revival, which was is an initiative put out by the U.S. bishops back in last year, actually, to help people develop a closer relationship with Jesus in the Eucharist. So we're actually in the 2nd year, which is the Parish Eucharistic Revival, and actually last summer, Dave and I were asked to be on our parish committee for that, and actually now we're spearheading, or we're heading up that committee. But that I think is a good thing, and at the diocese or at the diocesan level, parish activities were done. At the parish level, for example, we just had Trapper Jack come to our parish and speak. We're expanding adoration hours. We're going to be doing a video on what happens when we take the Eucharist, Holy Communion, to people in hospitals, nursing homes, and hospice facilities. So it's how do we understand that Jesus is really present in the Eucharist and have a closer relationship with him. So that's one piece. A second one is what's called the marriage catechumenate. So again, last summer, Pope Francis, realizing the state of marriage in general and in Catholic marriages, how do we improve the preparation and formation? So he asked that we reorient ourselves to a marriage catechumenate. So a one-day pre-cana isn't enough. And even what we did, where we almost doubled that, how do we expand the formation and also give couples preparing to marriage a couple that can walk with them both before and after marriage. So
good idea.
Marriage catechumenate. How well it will take off is, it depends a lot on the parish priest, on the bishop, and the couples. Are they willing to invest that as opposed to just going and getting married? And then a third thing, it's not that new, but it's relatively new, is called the Given Institute, as I've given myself to you. It's a nonprofit organization that recognizes that women have particular leadership skills, and they want to embrace those and help develop those women, Catholic women, to be able to give those gifts to the church, back to the church and back to the world. So they have leadership forums. I think giveninstitute.com is their website. So I think those are three kind of noteworthy things.
Mm-hmm. How can stable and strong family units be established and maintained?
So first of all, ideally, children are born from a marriage with a mom and a dad.
You bet.
Sometimes that doesn't happen, whether through divorce or death, or single parenthood. But ideally is marriage. So ideally, we have stronger marriage preparation. I think that would start off the marriage and the family right. There are a lot of healthy marriage initiatives going on. There are dating initiatives where you start with the kids in high school, even secular, not even just Catholic, but relationship webinars, relationship workshops. So I think stabilizing the marriage and strengthening the marriage is the first thing. But for everybody, whether you're Catholic or not, to have some sort of spiritual, but better religious support, because you need that relationship with God as an anchor.
You bet.
So that one. The third thing is and the goodness about having a church community or a parish community is you get the support of people who are relatively like-minded, and they're going to help support you in your values that you want to pass on to your kids.
Right.
Because it's tough if you don't have friends that buy into those values. It's tough to do that. So having the support of family and friends and a parish community. But lastly, I'd say as parents, being able to spend good, adequate, excellent time with your children. And it's even been said to waste time with your children.
Right.
And I mean, we know that families are busy between work schedules, school schedules, church schedules, sports schedules. It's hard to develop good habits that keep your family together. One model that I liked came from Dr. Greg Popchak, who's a family therapist, and his wife Lisa. And they recognize through the church that the family is the domestic church. And they focused on three key areas. First of all, relationships and family relationship and attachment, rituals of connection, and service to others. So relationships and attachments, again, pretty common sense, is make family time a priority. And lavish, extravagant affection on those in your family.
You bet.
And generous and consistent attention. Okay. The second one that is, I think, pretty neat is rituals of connection. And I think that's about building habits. And the habits that they talked about are being able to work together, play together, talk together, and pray together. So if you can take those four rituals, and you can probably Google Dr. Greg Popchak and find where that is, but when it's work together, it's within your house. So instead of just telling the child to clean his room, you work together to clean his room, or you work together to
okay.
And praying together. Father Patrick Peyton, the family that prays together stays together. We actually use that in our marriage prep because it really does work.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then the third thing is service. So service first to your own family, and then service as a family to others. So those were his suggestions.
And very good, very good. How can someone get in touch with you if they have questions after they've seen the show?
Probably my email.
Okay. And that is?
So we live on Tuscan Lane, so my email address is tuscanlanewither@gmail.com, but it's TUSCANLNWITHER @gmail.com. I used to have, and I still do have, Catholic32 @gmail.com, but now my husband owns that one, and we don't want him getting
Okay, that's fine. And that'll appear on the bottom of the
Okay.
screen while people are watching.
Great.
In summary, what makes sense to you and what doesn't?
Well,
I ask everyone that question.
I know you do. So you know, Rudy, that for 30 plus years I've been engulfed in this religious world. So I have a Catholic worldview, and I see things through the lens of the Catholic faith.
Okay.
So what makes sense to me, and I hope to the viewers, at least to be open-minded about this, is to know that we have a Creator God who loves us and wants to be with us forever.
Okay.
He's a Father who sent His Son to redeem us, to show us the Father's love, and to show us how to love. So it would make sense to me, in having balance in our lives, to at least tend to that spiritual aspect of our lives. Amidst the busyness of your days, the work you have, the children you have, can you find the right amount of time and balance that? And your spiritual life is everything that leads you to heaven. So whether it's prayer, which it is prayer, a prayer life, doing good works, and if you're a Catholic, you're using the sacraments. And on that note, I recall what St. Gregory the Great had said when he reflected on the parable of the laborers in the vineyard. So it goes like this. It's from Matthew 20. The kingdom of heaven is like the landowner who comes and is looking for laborers to work in his vineyard. So he comes at dawn and finds some laborers, and after agreeing to the normal wage or the just wage, he sends them out into his vineyard. But he comes back a few hours later at 9 o'clock and sees workers idle and says, you too come. And then at noon and at 3 o'clock and at 5 o'clock. So St. Gregory the Great compared these various calls of God, who is the landowner, to the different stages in our life. Childhood is the dawn, adolescence, adulthood, older life, and very old life. So it seems that it would make sense that we ought to listen. Now, sometimes you need the silence to listen, but if you can listen for that call of God, whatever He leads you to, and say yes, because He wants you only to be the person He created you to be, which is different for every single one of us, which is why the saints are exciting. They're not boring because they're all individual. So I thank you for letting me share that.
Okay. Well, thank you for appearing. You're really wise and wonderful. I use that term lightly to introduce you, but you are wise and wonderful. And thank you for appearing. And I want to thank the audience for watching. Please let us know if you have any comments or questions. If you are an interesting person or you know of one, please furnish their contact details, and we'll work from there. And remember, seatbelts save lives.
The preceding program was presented to you by a community producer. The statements, views, and opinions expressed were not necessarily those of ALC TV or the City of Avon Lake.